Hey, it's Tom from Audio Ordeal, and today I'm going to be showing you the first steps when you approach mixing a track. So if you're really interested in mixing tracks, I do recommend you go to Mixing Secrets for the Small Studio Additional Resources. This is an absolutely brilliant book. It's by Mike Senior, and the online resources have plenty of free downloads of all the multi-track stems of songs for which you can practice. And so this tutorial is based on one of these multi-track stems, and I am going to be looking at it having never listened to this one before. And so we will be able to look at it and we will be able to see it from the very initial approach. So what I'm going to do first of all, I'm just going to hit play. I'm going to get a general vibe of what is going on, and then I'll show you my first steps in what I would do to start mixing a track such as this. So we got it clipping here. What we can do, we can just select all the tracks and we'll just bring them down a few decibels so we can at least see the loudest bit isn't clipping too much. So let's play again from about here. So people recommend that you have a good 6 to 12 decibels headroom whenever you're mixing, just to allow you to work everything up. So I'm going to bring this down even further, and we'll just reset this meter. Bear in mind, turning the volume up and down isn't destructive, and so you can always turn it back up later, or even better, do what I'm doing just now, reaching over to my speakers and turning it up on the speakers. So this way I've got a lot of headroom on my computer, on the master track here, and I've got plenty of room to work with, and as I work through the mixing I can of course turn the volume up when needed. So let's actually look at this track. We have 30 different tracks. I think these waveforms here are just waiting to load. Yeah, they are. And so we've got 30 tracks of different instruments. The very first thing I always do is group the instruments. So let's first of all get the drums at the top. So as seems to be the case, we have all our drums here, and I'm going to hit C, which is a shortcut I have made to just set them all to a random custom color. Now then, we've got our bass. Let's hit C again, and we'll just cycle it through till it's a different color. Now we've got our synths here, so all of these. Let's custom color that. We have guitars. We've got several guitars, so let's custom color that. Vocals, and the rest is vocals, so we can just figure out a color we like for that. And there we have it. So now at least we have a nice setup. Everything's easy to identify, and we could even group them further so we could make individual buses. But for now I do not intend on doing that, because for now I am going to do the very first step that should always happen. So I've got a preset here, high pass filter at 20 Hz. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy the selected effects and I'm going to insert it into each one. Okay, so lesson learned, don't do that too much, because that is a huge amount of tracks and that got really boring. So now we've got everything high pass and everything is tagged. I have set the high pass to 20 Hz so we can adjust each one accordingly when we get to them, but this just means we're freeing up the absolute lowest end of audio. There should be no sound below 20 Hz that will contribute to the music, because that is below the human frequency of hearing. So we've just cut that out, and that should probably increase some headroom for us. It's just unwanted noise that would never be useful to us. Now then, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add some folders. So I'll call this the drum folder, and we'll get this down here. And what we'll do, we will contain the drums within it. And containing the drums allows us to do both individual processing, let's say on the kick drums or snares, and it also allows us to do macroscopic processing on the drums. I'm going to do another one for synths. This is going to go here, and we'll just stop this folder here. Another one for guitar, and that's obviously going to go here. And then finally we'll have one for the vocals as well. And so this gives us room to do both individual processing and the mix processing for the individual mix buses. And if you don't know what a bus is, basically we're just sending all these tracks through this track, and this is essentially a bus. So we can route all the tracks through a certain track, and that allows us to essentially process them all together. I'll stretch these out so we can have access to all the effects and the bass. Now then, one thing you might wonder if you are new to mixing is, why does this track have 2 kick drums recorded? And so it very much depends on the style of music. A lot of dance music will have lots of layered kick drums. A lot of rock music and live band music, when they have a drum kit, they'll have several microphones. For example, snare drums normally have a top mic and a bottom mic, and they capture different things. I'll play the kick drum first and then we'll look at the snare. So as you can see here, one of the kicks is very electronic and the other one is a lot more live. Let's now look at the snare. So it's 2 different kind of snare tracks going together in this case. This just allows us to mix and blend differently. Quite often when you've got 2 snare tracks, they're actually identical, and it's just different tone which we can mix and blend to our taste. But since they're different and they kind of work together, as we'll just chuck into another bit. One of the things we could well do is just pan each one to the side. And they can complement each other. So I'm not going to pan them too much, probably only about 10-15%. And if you're listening on headphones, you can see there's suddenly a little bit of space there. Now with kick drums, of course, you always want to keep them mono, same with the bass where possible. And this is the kind of fast bits that I like to do when mixing. Essentially you kind of get the volumes right, and then before you even fully mix the volumes, you can start working on pans. So for example, we can look at the hi-hats, and we can pan the hi-hats over, and the hi-hat's normally on the left to the perspective of the drummer, or of course the audience, it would be on the right. But very much depending on how you want to have it. You might want the hi-hat spread across the channels so you've got some stereo, and by having 2 different tracks this makes it very nice. All of a sudden, if we are to add the snares, so I've not even touched the volumes apart from turning them all down, and just by spacing out the sounds we really suddenly have quite a good mix. So this is the kind of stages you want to look at first. Mixing is often seen to be all about adding effects, adding lots of different stuff, but the cleaner the mix, the better the track. And so I always prefer to have everything fitting in place first, and then only using effects for the creative purposes, such as like finally gluing it all together with compression or adding space with reverb. We can do the same with the synths. Let's have a little listen. So one thing to note here is that we have lots of different frequencies being played, and the standard rule is keep bass mono. So I've got Reaper set up so that the ready frequencies are low and the greeny blue ones are high. So what we want to do is we want to observe which ones we want to keep in mono. So I would say this track and this one we want as central as possible, and it means we can focus on spreading these ones out. So this one's kind of low mids because it's quite yellowy, so we maybe only want to pan it a little bit, but these two can pan quite a bit farther out and they will still sound good. Let's have a little listen to them all playing together. Just bringing the volume up of the low frequencies. So there we go, we've hardly mixed it, we've just done 2 volume tweaks and all of a sudden everything's coming into place quite nicely. Let's just play the drums and the synths together and see how that works. So it's all quite quiet and sparse at the moment, that's because we've not got much else in. Let's try playing with some bass getting added. And so everything here is just working on the initial stages of the mix. For example, we know this is quite a synth-driven, quite electronic-y style track, so we really want to make these drums fat and hard-hitting, so that means we can add quite a lot of processing, quite a lot of parallel compression, everything to make them sound really thick. We look at this bass here, it's already pretty thick, pretty chunky, so this one maybe doesn't need as much processing, maybe more just subtractive processing like EQ. These synths all need to be brought out and tightened up, so a bit of processing there. And then we can just look at the guitars, which seem to not add much. They're not throughout the track. It looks like it's just going to be riffs for the main bits. Let's have a listen. So it very much seems to be the case. We can probably just, without even testing, have a play about with the pans, and let's see how this works. And there you go, we will obviously revisit this. This is always just the first steps. But just by playing about with all these things, we can really have a mix going very nicely. So we've got 3 lead vocals and then the rest are backing vocals. Now then, if we look to the lead vocals, we have 1 for the verse, as it looks like, and then we've got 2 for the chorus. Now we're probably going to want the chorus to be panned out quite a lot for a bit of breadth, and we'll keep the lead vocals stuck in the centre. And then when we listen to this, we'll see what happens as it hits the chorus.
These feelings, they swallow you. They swallow you. Your head is strong, but your body's fierce, and we celebrate round here.
So even just hearing the 2 lead vocals spread out to the side, it sounded really good. What we can do, we can narrow it a little bit, so just below 30. Now we've got the backing vocals. Let's just take alternate backing vocals and pan them hard one way. And then let's take the other ones and pan them hard the other way. Let's see the spread now.
Your head is strong, but your body's fierce, and we celebrate round here. Your head is strong, but your body's fierce, so we celebrate.
And so this sounds really good. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add an extra track with a folder, and this is going to be the backing vocal folder. and we're going to add another track, and this is going to be the lead vocal folder. And this is because we want the lead vocals to be processed in a different way compared to the backing vocals. We want the lead vocals to be cleaner, whereas the backing vocals can be maybe more washed in reverb comparatively, and they're just having the main vocals sit on top of them. So we could even add very gentle sidechain compression with these triggering the compression of these, and this is just allowing us, we could then decide we don't want them different, and we could just remove these tracks and put all the processing there. But as this is a first steps video, it's just setting out everything so you can mix really easily. And so if we listen to the whole mix, bearing in mind I've not added any effects other than a high pass EQ, and I have panned and made 2 or 3 volume adjustments. We'll see how well the whole mix sounds now. So the whole thing is still really needing enhancing, mixing, brought out, but from this basic setup we can then work, and this is a fairly large track or track listing. We now have 36 tracks to deal with, all mixing together. But just having this layout, having everything coloured, having everything in folders and panned out and roughly volume matched to start with is nice. We can then do soloing, so let's say we want the guitars, we can solo in, mix all the guitars to each other, and once we've got that nailed we can then just mix the whole mix of guitars to the rest of the song. Same with the synths. So we can break it down into more manageable chunks, make sure everything mixes well together within these subfolders, and then we can bring it into the greater picture. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It was meant to be quick. I think this has gone on quite a bit longer than I expected, but that's just because there's a lot of things you need to do. Lots of preparation and lots of cool tricks just to make your life easier. This whole thing works on whether it's your own song or you're mixing someone else's, and especially if you've never heard the song before, getting it into all these groups, getting it into these folders and having a little play about gives you enough time to familiarise yourself with the song, especially when it's in its badly mixed stages, and that way you can really see improvement. So thank you very much for watching. I'm on Patreon and I am on Facebook, and I would really appreciate just likes and subscribes on YouTube. It helps me make more videos. It encourages me, and if you enjoyed this or if you've got any feedback on how you would do it differently, please leave it in the comments, because this is not maybe the correct way of doing it for everyone. This is just how I've done it and how I've made it easy for myself. So thank you very much for watching.